So I don't know about you, but I've watched many '80s movies where I've been thinking, man, this would make a killer reboot. I remember the last time I watched Top Gun, and I was thinking, if they, I know they're making a sequel now. We talked about this earlier. You told me they're making a sequel. Why are they doing that? But I was thinking when I was watching Top Gun, what an incredible TV show that would make nowadays to just like dive into the whole pilot school thing. Everybody likes
Hell yeah.
everybody that grew up with Harry Potter and all that, love the school idea and just like shaping around that. But people are fascinated by pilots. I'm one of them. I wanted to be a pilot for the longest time when I was young, but I get way too motion sick. So anyway, my point is 80s movies have a lot of inherent storytelling prowess. There's something there because people back then really valued the story arcs, they valued the characters, and there's something there that's just a gold mine. And if you can figure out how to translate that into today's modern society, I think there's a lot there to be said about, the improved technology, the acting prowess that we have now, the cinematography, all of that. Yeah, I don't know. I think we should talk through our favorite picks for '80s reboots.
And that is exactly what we'll do. Welcome back to the second draft.
I'm just gonna dive right into my first thought when, other than Top Gun, which I just mentioned, my first thought when I was thinking about what would be a reboot was the Warriors. And I know that's like a really obscure but also cult phenomena movie. Like people really bought into the Warriors after its time. I think that would make an incredible TV series. You would be able to have, and even if they rebooted it as a movie, I would be happy too. But I personally think that the movie now, when you watch it, frankly, it drags a little bit. It's slightly boring in parts.
Sure.
You need to kind of grin and bear it because we're so accustomed to the wham bam in your face Michael Bay big explosion confetti everywhere movies, and those were a little bit more story driven. So the Warriors, I remember watching it going like, man, there's so much depth here. There's so much of a mythos that is surrounding this story. And if you were to take a TV series and just like dive into each one of the gangs in a particular episode and then have them all culminate in like a battle royale situation, that would be incredible. That would be great because you'd have some crossover episodes and I don't know, it would be fun. It'd be a lot of fun.
No, that sounds like a blast. I mean, you could do almost like maybe not something along the lines like The Wire or Breaking Bad, but just like you can do it like a serious tone, like it could be like maybe like a near future type thing where the gangs have taken over New York or something. But no, I like your idea of having like you could do like an episode about like the baseball Furies or whatever, and something happens in that episode, and then you go back and you follow one of the other gangs and you see like the events that led into that episode and like interweave these various stories. So yeah, like you said, like each one of those gangs, even for whatever limited screen time they had in the original movie, there was a mythos there. You wanted to know more about those dudes that were running around, the weird makeup and what their story was and whatnot. No, I think it'd be awesome to go back and remake it as a TV series.
We should call this episode "Can You Dig It?"
Can you dig it? Yeah, I can dig it.
It is I mean, the Warriors itself has informed a lot of pop culture, like video games.
Hell yeah.
I mean, the Outfield, the one-hit wonder, their band name came from the Warriors.
Yeah.
Yeah, those like really weird connections that everybody has. Most people, I think, just know the Warriors come out to play.
Yeah.
But beyond that, yeah, it would be a lot of fun. It'd be a romp. I don't know.
I would be fully on board. I'm gonna pick one now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, do it. What do you got?
80s reboots. Okay, so when I was a little kid, one of my favorite things besides Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was the Thundercats. Anybody watching this remembers the Thundercats. It was a super, super cheesy 80s cartoon on like Saturday mornings and whatnot. It's got a cult following. It has had a cult following since the 80s. They tried to reboot it several years back on Cartoon Network, and I think they kind of just mishandled it. I thought it was great. I thought it was an excellent not only like a true to form reboot, but also something that kind of brought it up into modern times. It was less of like the mystical fantasy unicorns and rainbows type stuff, and more like it's cliche to say grittier, but like a grittier, like a almost like a fantasy steampunk type of thing going on with it. It was really cool. It just didn't pan out. They couldn't find a time slot for it. It couldn't find a following, so it only lasted, I think, like less than a season. You can find that season on Amazon. If you can find it, you can probably find it for cheap. You should watch it because it's excellent. I would love to see somebody like Netflix take that and buy it and start making more episodes and give it the proper production it deserved. Actually, Voltron Legendary Defender Season 5 just came out today on Netflix, and I love Voltron as a kid too. And what they've been able to do with Voltron on Netflix has just been stellar.
I was going to say I've heard good things, yeah.
Oh, it's incredible. It's weird to say it's in its 5th season because it's only been around for like a year and a half. So they've been releasing like 5 or 6 episode seasons like sporadically, several months at a time. And like Steven Yeun from The Walking Dead, he plays Keith. So it's like an all-star cast. The voice acting is killer. The animation is just top-notch. And the storytelling is stellar. They took a super cheesy 80s concept and they made something legitimately, like, inarguably good with it. And I think if you can do that with Voltron, you could easily do that with Thundercats, too. And they tried once and they succeeded, but they just didn't follow through with it. Somebody needs to pick up that property and follow through with it, because there's clearly something there. People still love that show 30 years later. There's something there.
You got to know that. I mean, there have to be savvy people in Hollywood that know that you can reboot things like that. I mean, Firefly fell victim to that whole instance of the studio didn't really know what to do with it and didn't see the value there. They didn't see beneath the rough, kind of rugged exterior into this like wildly popular internal kind of value that it had.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. Yeah, I like the idea of Thundercats coming back. I only watched it a few times. I didn't see the reboot, but I remember watching it on, like you said, Saturday morning cartoons. That was my introduction to Thundercats, and I had a lot of fun with it. Yeah. It reminded me of all of my kind of favorite get the team together, led by a fearless leader kind of team.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cartoons. So
who also happens to be an 8-year-old in a man's body.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah. No, it's one of the quintessential 80s cartoons, and it's weird how some of those properties work consistently as reboots. Like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they've rebooted that as a new series like 9 or 10 times now, just in my lifetime. He-Man is something that hasn't ever panned out since the original run in the 80s, and they've tried to reboot it multiple times.
That one, okay, so
smart about it.
He-Man, I think, has some misogynistic undertones that a lot of people don't buy into. I remember having these debates in college for some kind of in gender and ethics classes. But when you look at Thundercats, it's just a fun show. So many people have been in Hollywood have been buying into old school reboots. I mean, we just saw Power Rangers come out, and they did arguably a good job taking a kind of really campy, cheesy, over the top intellectual property and turning it into something that kids in the Generation Z Snapchat gen folks would enjoy. Do the same thing for Thundercats, as long as held some kind of adherence to the original source material, which I know is the thing that every fan always says. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So my second pick, and I'm so adamant about this one because this 80s movie is just it sticks out in my head as one of the quintessential ones. The Lost Boys. I think that would make an incredible either reboot movie, reboot TV show, make it a mini series. I don't care what you want to do with it. I think it would be a great Netflix original. Amazon got a hold of it. It would be fantastic. But I love The Lost Boys.
Yeah, man. I'm right there with you. Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland, Alex Winter, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman,
Billis Preston Esquire as a vampire. Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah.
Yeah, it had a lot going on, and I think the fun part about it is that they knew who their characters were, right? Like everybody had their role in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
You had your kind of comic relief, but also, funnily enough, the people that were most knowledgeable about what was going on were the characters that were the comic relief, the fools. And you see that in movies now. That kind of theme or trope is cropping up with movies like Cabin in the Woods, where the fool character is the one that really knows what's going on. You know, and if you watch The Lost Boys, the Frog Brothers know what's going on, the grandpa knows what's going on, and they're the ones that seem like they're off their rocker. And if you take that kind of like kitschy enthusiasm, you take that really over the top kind of fun 80s vibe and you apply it to nowadays, there are plenty of people that are really invested in the subculture that was the 80s.
Yeah.
And we see that with Ready Player One that's coming out at the end of this month.
Mm-hmm.
People love that stuff. They love the nostalgia factor.
Yeah.
This is a movie that plenty of people know of but aren't necessarily familiar with. So if you reboot it, I think you'd get a lot of buy-in.
Yeah, they redid Fright Night, which is kind of sort of similar in a lot of ways. They rebooted it a few years ago with Colin Farrell, and it was really good. It held up to the original, and I think if they can do Fright Night, they could easily do Lost Boys and do it justice. Yeah, and again, it's one of those super cool, super fun 80s movies that would find an audience again if they rebooted it. Especially with the whole, like, they might be a little bit late on the vampire craze. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's in its favor that they're a little bit late on the vampire craze. Maybe they could bring it back.
I think what happened is that the vampire phase happened, and they did try to capitalize on it with sequels.
Yeah.
And the continuation, because Corey Feldman was still willing to play a frog brother in the movies, and they collapsed, they tanked because they lost that love of the source material. Like, they still threw it back, obviously, and they had some.
They lost that love and feeling.
Yeah, maybe they lost that love and feeling. But
just to bring it back full circle to our Top Gun discussion.
Yeah, they
sorry
definitely lost that love and feeling for the source material, but you can't have an Edgar Frog that basically, yeah, I don't know. They didn't understand what they were going for with the sequel, and I don't think it really panned out. I would love to see them reboot it and this is pretty typical, but as a TV series, it'd be great.
Yeah.
There's plenty enough in that background story to elongate what was a 2-hour movie into 6-episode, 8-episode arc.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So who you got next?
My next pick is something that's been hotly debated for many years now. And there's a couple of times where it almost looked like it was sort of maybe going to happen. I don't know why it hasn't happened, because the star of this franchise has had a resurgence in his film career. Why they don't do it, I don't know. And my choice is Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
The Governor.
Yeah, man. I mean, he's no longer a politician. He's back in acting. He's actually doing some really, really great roles lately. Like, he's done some crappy B-level movies, but he's done some really great movies on top of that. And I think it's time to give Conan that, not that reboot thing with whatever they did with that one kid actor that came out a few years ago that nobody saw, and everybody who saw it thought it was shit. They need to do a true blue, weird, high fantasy, goofy as hell, but also kind of serious Conan the Barbarian movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and wrap up that mythos properly. Because it's even hinted at in the original two films, The Barbarian and The Destroyer, about a story about King Conan, like what he does after he's done all that. And now, like, I feel like Schwarzenegger's like the proper age to do that. Like, he'd be like the old, grizzled, like maybe somewhat wizened warrior who maybe has to jump off the throne and go take care of business or something. But just do it, man. Like, we've seen now that high fantasy is acceptable in Hollywood now. Like, you can make high fantasy movies. You can do your Game of Thrones. You can do your Lord of the Rings. You can make that shit work, and it's not going to be a silly niche movie anymore. It would be something that people would like actually legitimately be interested in now. So, and Schwarzenegger's just a blast anyway. And the Conan movies are weird and fun and adventurous and silly, and I feel like a proper modernization of it with Schwarzenegger as he's grown as an actor in recent years would be fantastic. So just make the movie, Hollywood. Do it. Schwarzenegger, it's ready. It's time. Let's do this.
So yeah, I mean, you're right about the high. Do it now. You're right about fantasy having this kind of resurgence. I know plenty of people now don't have any qualms about talking about playing D&D because they recognize it as a live storytelling method, and those people genuinely have a more of a mental capacity to be able to live storytell.
Yeah, there's no stigma anymore.
So my question for you though is, how do you circumvent, because Hollywood, I know there's some executive producer in Hollywood going, yeah, okay, I'll buy into Conan. Two things are either going to happen. Schwarzenegger is going to be the protagonist of this film, or some young hotshot is going to be the protagonist of this film. How do you circumvent that? Because we've seen both fail before. We've seen Rambo come back and that really flopped. We've seen, like you just mentioned, the young Conan come back and that flopped. So I guess maybe that could be the storyline as long as Schwarzenegger is involved. But how do you combat that? Do you do a resurgence of Karate Kid kind of thing, or do you? I don't know. What do you think?
It would all depend on how comfortable Schwarzenegger is being physical in the role.
True.
I mean, he's back in good shape. I would fully believe him as like an old, wizened, grizzled warrior king going out on one last adventure. If you had to have him be like the mentor guy and have the younger hotshot, then yeah, I can see that working too. As long as you got Schwarzenegger out there with the long hair and the big two-handed sword, and yeah, as long as he's out there and he's making shit happen, that's
his broadsword giant. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like a claymore, like that giant. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he could be like the Obi-Wan to a Leeds Luke, I guess. I suppose. It could even be like the son of Conan. I don't know. You can do whatever you wanted to, as long as Schwarzenegger was front and center, and the whole Conan mythos, because I love those movies. As long as you give that mythos one final, nice, well-rounded, complete chapter, and just wrap it up and let Conan have his heyday, and let Schwarzenegger kind of put that franchise to rest. It people are still asking for it because they never properly ended it. So if they could do it with Rocky, come on, like, it's Conan.
Yeah, I mentioned Rambo, but they did do it with Rocky. You're right. Like, Creed was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah,
incredible movie. Coogler.
I say thank you like I made it.
Coogler.
Right.
Yeah,
Coogler,
I don't. Okay, so
Coogler.
I mean, there's something to be said about 15-second scripts, though. Coming up, and I think that would be great. Conan, Last Hunt, Conan the Barbarian has to confront the very real issue that is his daughter is going to become exactly like him. I don't know.
Sure, something like that. Yeah.
There are 100 different scripts. Maybe we should do that. That should be what we see in the comments or on Twitter. Is you come up with your 10-second, 15-second script for Conan. Let us hear it.
Yeah. Give us your elevator pitch for a Conan King Conan movie. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
We'll come up with a couple too. I don't know. I'm excited. That sounds like fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah. So, you've already done your second pick. I've already done my pick. We were talking before we started about a franchise that we both kind of agreed on. That'd be a good place to wrap this up.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that franchise was the Goonies.
It was, yeah. There's so much going on with the Goonies. One of my childhood favorites, for sure.
Yeah.
Still one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
I had a love for adventure films, but more particularly, I had a love for gather the team together.
Like Mighty Duck style type things.
Yeah, Mighty Duck style, and we've talked about a few of them on this show, but like, I don't know. In Ocean's 11 is another example. It's just that gather the team. In screenwriting, there's an author named Blake Snyder who talks about. He wrote a book called Save the Cat, and he talks about screenwriting beats. And he wrote a second book called Save the Cat 2, and in that he talks about the third act and what happens in the third act. Because right up until that point, you have these lead-ups that are the Dark Night of the Soul, All Is Lost, these very dour, sad beats where the hero has kind of lost everything. And then right at the third act, you have this resurgence where they gather the team back together and they go and accomplish their goal. And you could see that, you could assign that to any movie that you could probably think of off the top of your head that has a legitimate structure. But I think I just love the idea of like a team coming together to accomplish something. And the Goonies had this kind of like, they're just a group of kids that were all buddies, and they were naturally inquisitive. They were curious, and they wanted to create an adventure in their humdrum town that was constantly plagued by clouds and rainfall. And they did. They found a treasure map, and that every kid at that age dreams of something like that. And I think that story,
the ultimate wish fulfillment. I mean, their dad was a curator for a museum, so they grew up around that old like treasure map, like Treasure Island pirates and stories, and all of a sudden they found themselves in one, which is fantastic. Yeah,
it's a classic storyline, and it's never gone away. That will still be, I would say 50 years from now, that will still be a storyline that people enjoy, because they want to believe that they can always, anytime, jump into this storyline. And there's it's not wild to think that the like a coastline city would, something like crazy like that would happen, you know. They played into that with the reboot of Red Dawn and a few movies.
Yeah. I don't know how many pirates actually made their way to Oregon.
Yeah, sure.
You could do something like Boston or something, Canada. I don't know. Well, maybe not Canada. But yeah, I mean, yeah. But now I think is like a really good time if they were going to do it, because now like Sean Astin had massive success with the Lord of the Rings series. His star is on the rise again with Stranger Things 2. Everybody's all about Sean Astin. Josh Brolin has become this amazing action star. Like he's got both Deadpool 2 and Infinity War coming out, where he plays Thanos. Like, it might actually raise the production costs if they were to do a Goonies reboot, include the original cast, because now those guys are so popular, and they've always been so popular. They might be a little bit expensive, so you might have to do something like maybe like their kids go on an adventure, like Bran has some kids, and you know Mikey's kids, you know, they hang out and they all go on some sort of adventure, and you can kind of bring in other cast members here and there. It'd probably be a little bit weird if Bob from Stranger Things and Thanos were going out and climbing through caves and shit. So it'd probably have to be their kids. It'd have to be like a generational thing. But having Sean Astin and Josh Brolin and all the other actors that were in there, even Corey Feldman, if they could get him to kind of settle down for a little bit and just relax, it would lend the film some legitimacy, and it'd be cool to see those characters as grown-ups, because all we've ever seen them is like these wild, adventurous kids. And Goonies. Yeah.
Goonies would be great. I mean, in the movie, there's plenty of family interaction. Like, we know who the parents of the kids are. They play a big role at the end. Mm-hmm. They play fairly, like, not as much of a big role, but you know, they're in the beginning too. So there's no reason that family can't be front and center in that movie, and they can't be involved in a pretty prominent way while still lending way for the next generation, kind of the new Goonies, to come in.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. I mean, we see in the original Goonies how all these kids that are going off on this crazy adventure really take after their parents, you know? And it's sort of a different way, like Mikey and Bran, they take after their dad because they're so in love with the idea of like treasure and pirates and whatnot, whereas their dad is, but in more of like an academic way, because he's a curator for a museum. You know, and at the end of the movie, we find out that Data is a crazy inventor and comes up with all these booty traps and gadgets and whatnot, because that's what his dad does. Like, his dad wants to take a family photo, so he throws up open his trench coat, and the Polaroid flips down on a spring. It's awesome. Yeah. So I mean, it's already the blueprint is already there for it to be like a generational story, because the original Goonies take after their parents, and now the next generation of Goonies would take after the original Goonies. So I swear to God, we should stop doing these videos and just start writing screenplays.
You're right. I mean, I mean, further than that, even the antagonists in the Goonies, the downfall of the antagonist is their misunderstanding of family. I mean, Sloth, for instance, is the turncoat that changes the game for them in the end. They have lost, and that is that dark night of the soul part that I talked about just a second ago. And then the team is reassembled because Sloth is a turncoat. He comes to the side of the Goonies and helps.
Because he finds his true family, not the abusive family that was broken.
Right, they accept him for who he is, and there's something said about that too, which that's another theme in the movie, and maybe we should do another movie on another film on the Goonies.
Maybe,
yeah. There's a lot to be said there, but it's fun, and it would make a great reboot. Yeah.
I feel like all of these choices would be better choices for reboots than Karate Kid, but we already did that video, and it was met with some mixed response.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine. That's always great. This is a dialogue. This is a conversation. If you disagree with us, let us know. If you've got a better idea for a reboot, let us know. And if you think our ideas are good, but they should be fleshed out a little bit more, let us know what you would do with our choices.
Or if you want to see the screenplay, we'll start writing.
Well, we're not going to share it with you because we'd have to get the copyright on that and shop it around and become millionaires.
First, yeah.
And then we'd actually buy a real bar, and then we'd actually film the video in a real bar instead of the imaginary bar I created in Photoshop. So thank you guys as always. Leave your comments down below. Check out some of our other videos if you like what we're talking about here today, and we will see you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.